Hey, Susan Palmer of Lead Cat Press, and this is my weekly studio update. It's a holiday week, and things are busier than ever, so I wanted to hop on and share with you some things that have come up in my studio this week. One thing I've been noticing a lot of are these, I call them mic drop lessons. They're usually like quick or mini lessons on Instagram or YouTube, and I think a lot about these because sometimes my students watch them and they send them to me and they're like, what do you think? You know, like, what can I do with this? And a lot of times I'm really excited about them. And I call them mic drop lessons because an instructor comes in and they explain a really tricky concept and, they distill it down and kind of explain something about that in a real concise manner. And it leaves the audience just feeling like, wow, that was amazing. You know, now I understand something I didn't understand before. And, what happens to a lot of students is, they see these and the way that they're presented expects the student to go, wow, my life is different, And the student gets on the guitar and they're trying this new concept and they're like, it falls short of what they expect. Because these challenging concepts can be broken down and explained in simple terms. But for a student to take a concept and understand it at a level that allows them to put that into their own music, that's another level of learning. And that's when I get really excited when students send me these videos, because that's my jam is, not just explaining a concept, but, finding a way that each student can learn that and then put that into their own playing. And, I've been teaching 20 something years, so I've got a lot of tools. I've got a lot of these pathways to learning that I use with different students. And everybody's a little different. I'd like to do a YouTube video that is geared for every single kind of student out there, but it would be, it'd be 3 hours long and it wouldn't work for everybody to watch for that long to find, the part that works for them. And so, that's where the private lessons can really be helpful because I know where my students are at. I know what tools they have. I generally know what they understand. And if I test them on that frequently so that I can figure out if there are any gaps in their understanding of things. And, and then I can kind of build them a pathway to really internalize that concept. And a lot of times I try to, kind of start a pathway, but get the students building that pathway along with me because, a student, they are their own best teacher, like you're going to be accountable to yourself more than I can hold you accountable. You're going to be hearing yourself practice. You know what your weaknesses are if your eyes are open, if you're really paying attention to that. So, I want to kind of show people what to look for and how, what's a good pathway look like kind of things. And I also like, being some guardrail, be a guardrail for students so that, if they start veering off the path a little bit, kind of being there to coax them back on if that's necessary. Sometimes students would take a pathway and go in a different direction. And I'm, been doing this long enough, I can see that the vista they are looking toward is a good place that they need to go to. So, we'll adapt our path from there. Anyways, I don't know. I think a lot of us teachers feel this way about those lessons there, that they're really great because they give us a lot of things to work on with students. It piques their curiosity, and then we get to do our jobs. So I want to go over a concept that has many different pathways to learn it. And I want to do this so that you can see the complexity involved in a concept and why it might be helpful to study with a teacher. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to study with me. I don't have room in my schedule for that. But I think a good teacher is going to have a lot of different pathways and is also going to be as interested in finding the right pathways for each student as I am. So I'll drop a link below. I have a little article on how to find a good teacher in your area. So I'll put that below so you can use that if you are on the search for a guitar teacher. You're more than welcome to reach out to me if you'd like private lessons with me. But I just want to say, I'm not guitar god. I think there are some really, really amazing teachers out there. And I like that there's a variety of really good teachers out there so that we can all work with different students who have different needs and just different learning styles. So at any rate, you can read about that below, and you can decide if you want to take that route. So anyways, the concept I want to go over is how to learn a lick in 12 keys, like a jazz lick. And I usually do this with my, kind of beginning intermediate level students. It's definitely like a beginning jazz kind of a thing. But the guitar has some built-in complexities to it that make something like this a little overwhelming at first. And part of the overwhelming factor has to do with the fact that, we've got this E here, this E. These are all the same pitch. If I had another fret, I could play it up there too. So 5 different places to play the same pitch. And now piano players, they have one place they can play a pitch. So we've got that. That's our first thing. So when you talk about learning a lick, even if you're talking about learning a lick in one key, like where, So, those are some of the things that I think about with each student, once we kind of head on the journey of learning some jazz licks. So I want to go over a variety of pathways that you could practice something like that. You could practice that lick, and here's the lick. I should start with that. The lick is going to be this. And this is going to be over a 2-5-1. Here I did it in the key of C. So we have D minor 7, G7, C major. And the lick is highlighting some of the half-step motion that happens between each chord change. So I start on F, which is the third of the flat 3, or the third of D minor. And I'm just walking down the C major scale from there. So F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E. So I start on the F, which is the minor third over that D minor. And then I'm walking down. And when I get to that C, that's the last note for that D minor 7 chord. And then the chord changes to G7. And at that point, I have this built-in half step here from C to B. And I'm going to play it C to B here just to be consistent with my fingering. So there's my C to B. So that's a half step there, which is a very powerful movement. And that note B is the third of that G7 chord. So that's a really strong note to hit. And then I'm going to walk it down from there. So A and G. And then F is the last note that I play over that G7 chord, which is my flat 7. And that also half steps down, really strong movement there, to the note E, which is the third of that C major chord. So I'm starting, every time the chord changes, I'm playing the third of that chord, whether it's major or minor. And I'm highlighting this flat 7 to 3 movement that happens in chord progressions like the 2-5-1. So D minor, G7, C major. So F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E. So I just played that lick right here in 5th position area using one of the caged scale patterns. So you could go through that cage scale and apply that lick to each one of those patterns. And some of these you could play it in 2 places, but I'm just playing it in the one place for right now. But you may want to work it out in those 2 places. So that'd be one way, in one key to play through that 2-5-1 lick in the key of C. And when you're doing that, there's another thing that, may come up, which is, well, I've got all these Fs. That's my first note of the lick. So, what if I started the lick on each one of those Fs? So I've got an F here, 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 or here. But what if I played that lick and I'm just using my first finger to start the lick? So that stays the same. But what if I'm right here? Now I played like a totally different fingering trying to figure out where to play that lick. And I could start it with my first finger here. What if I did that with my second finger? This I wouldn't recommend because your first finger becomes totally useless. But, start the other licks. You could do it up here with your second finger on each one of those Fs on each one of those strings. What if you did it with your third finger or your fourth finger? So you get the idea. It just expands. Like there's so many different ways to do that. So when one of my teachers was like, okay, here's a lick, you know, it's kind of a mic drop lesson of like, oh, here's a cool Charlie Christian lick, learn that at 12 keys. You know, I was like, okay, cool. And I go home and I'm like, where do I start? You know, because I was realizing all of these issues with like, there's just different positions, you know, like how do I keep my fingering consistent? I didn't know what to do. So, and that really hung me up for a while, and I couldn't get a clear answer of, you know, how to do this because I was hanging out with saxophone players and things, and people who didn't have that issue as a guitar player. So I think it's important to talk to other guitar players, mentors or teachers, you know, to figure out like what's a pathway to doing this. So, you know, for my students, I have them learn a lick in using the cage system up the neck, and then I have them, you know, focus on learning the lick in each one of the keys, you know, using the cage system like that, but also just playing the lick in like around fifth position area. And then, you know, with that fifth position, it just gives you a lot of flexibility, and you know, you're not too high on the neck, you're not too low on the neck, and it's a nice range. So that's kind of a good place to start that. And then, you know, along with that, learning it in those 12 keys, I think it's really important to apply that to some tunes. So as soon as you can, you know, even if you've just learned it in the key of C, well, find a tune that has a 2-5-1 in the key of C and apply it to that tune. And I have a list of tunes I use with my students, but I'm sure your teacher or you have some other real book tunes that have 2-5-1s in the key of C. So you want to put that into some different tunes as you learn those licks. I'm hoping that you know, kind of shed some light on different approaches for learning some 2-5-1s. And yeah, I just appreciate you guys listening and watching this. And I'm going to put a clip at the end of this, which is something I posted earlier this week on Instagram, and it's another lick that I use with my students. And what I did with that lick is, besides, instead of just playing it real dry, you know, just as quarter notes through that, which is how I always present these licks, I tried to play with the rhythm a little bit with them. So I'm playing it in all 12 keys, right around the fifth position area, but I was having a little bit of fun, kind of altering the rhythm up. And so you'll see what I mean, because you'll hear it here in a second. So thanks again for checking this out. I hope you have a great and safe holiday.